never let up a grand slam. Never, no one ever hit a grand slam off Jim Palmer ever in his whole career. Just asked him why. He said, well, they say that there's no empty base. That's not true. Home base is empty. I'd rather walk a guy in. So that's interesting. That was the machlokes in the whole thing. Is that something unforgivable or not? So he held, no, I'm not giving him a pitch to hit.
He talks about that in that book, about, home bases and open base. A little chapter on Jim Palmer.
Yeah. Well, he was Baltimore's guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we asked 3 questions. The 3 questions were, why does it say lamar? Because generally lamar is to say to someone else, and there's no one else to say to.
Right.
And even if you want to say it's the future generations, but the future generations were also there. All the neshamas were there. Why does it say Anochi Havaya Elokecho? Why doesn't it just say Anochi? I. Why does it have to say Havaya Elokecho? Why more information about HaKadosh Baruch Hu? We know who's talking. Just say Anochi. And why does it say Mi'eretz Mitzrayim Mi-Beis Avadim? It should just say Mi-Beis Avadim. Because the ikar is to take us out of one state of servitude into another state of servitude. So why does the pasuk also mention which country? Okay. So then the Rebbe started answering that about saying that the Torah, the world, and a human, specifically a yid, all contain within, they're all similar one to the other, and we can learn from the world something about Adam and Torah. And what do we learn from the world? 4 different levels. Doimim, Sameach, Chai, Medaber. Right? Mineral, vegetable, animal, and human. So the Rebbe explained the difference between those 4 levels in the world. Doimim is doimim, right? It's alive. It has it has a nefesh, but it has no chayus. It has no vitality. Right? Sameach. So Sameach changes, it grows, right? But even that, the Rebbe said, has no chayus, because how's the Rebbe defining chayus? Hergish, emotion, feeling. Oh, so the plant doesn't have any feeling. Chayus, so the Rebbe said, so that has chayus, it moves around, and it also has hergish, has feelings, right? It'll have moods. And this was a big chiddush, the Rebbe also said, in the level of chai, there's seichel. An animal has a certain level of seichel. And what's medaber? Generally, when you say medaber is seichel. Chai is animal life, and medaber is the one who has seichel. And that the word medaber means they speak, and speech is an expression of seichel. Right? So no, the Rebbe says medaber is l'mayla mina seichel, to be able to go beyond seichel, which is a huge chiddush. And then the Rebbe says, and ultimately the going beyond seichel is expressed in the lowest level in doimim. So we said we'll understand that later. We talked about a little bit the highest level of going beyond seichel, the Mesiras Nefesh will be expressed in Ma'aser B'Fayil, doing mitzvahs. Okay. The Yuvan Zeh, second paragraph on page 418. All right. V'yuven zeh mi'adaled sugim datscham kameshem ba'adam gufa. We'll have a fuller understanding of all of this from understanding the 4 levels of Daimim, Sameach, Chai, Medaber in Adam. Dihine. Sug ha'daimim ba'adam. Now this is very subtle, but we're not going to get it at first, but we'll get it as we keep using this idea as we go through the mimer. Because now that we know that daimim is the level in which everything's expressed, so then once we understand how things are expressed, we'll see how this idea of daimim in humans, how it, what it is and how it makes sense. Okay, so what's daimim? So the Rebbe says, who are oisios? Letters. I mean, it's not your flesh, right? That's in Gashmias. The Rebbe here is talking about conceptually and more in terms of the experience of a person. So what's daimim? Oisios. What are oisios? So oisios are letters, but oisios they're also called bricks, right? Or stones, right? Meaning that which is used to build whatever it is we're building. So now we use Oisius to think, we use Oisius to speak. So the most basic material that we use is Oisius, and the Oisius don't change, they're daimim, right? They don't change. An aleph is an aleph, a base is a base, a gimel is a gimel, right? Those noises that we make, right, which is also an expression of Oisius, same noises, right? There's a limited amount of noises that we can make in order to speak. And, well,
Sorry, I'm not sure. I understand. Maybe I missed how we say that Dome is related to Osius.
so what's daimim? Daimim is it's a basic level of existence that doesn't change.
Okay.
So what's an ois? What's a letter? A letter is like a building block of reality, but it doesn't change. There's a limited amount of letters. An aleph stays an aleph. It doesn't become a base. It doesn't become a bigger aleph or a smaller aleph. There are big. The Rebbe is going to talk about the fact that in Tanakh there are bigger letters, smaller letters. But that's just how they were created. They're bigger or smaller, but they don't grow from a smaller one to a bigger one. They're not sameach. They don't grow. An ois is a building block of reality. Doimim, like a rock, like a stone. And we'll see, it'll become clearer once we see how that is used in expression of the other levels. Because that's very subtle. Like, what do you mean, Oisius? What's it? Where? Show me what that looks like. Okay. Regarding letters, they have no vitality. They have existence, but no vitality. They don't move, they don't grow, they don't change, they don't emote. They don't grow from small to big, like Sameach. We'll see what that is in us. From one letter, you can't have two letters. A plant can actually grow, but a plant can also give birth to another plant, right? A plant will drop seeds, and there'll be three plants. A letter is a letter. It just is what it is, like a rock. A rock doesn't produce another rock, right? Again, how do we use letters? So you and I use letters to think, to speak, right? Without Oisius, how do we speak? But now, I've always wondered how children think when they don't have a language. So they must have a think in pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So the picture is also somewhat similar to an ois.
Static.
Right, yeah, exactly. Just is what it is. It's a static state of reality. Similarly, the different types of oisius, right? Because we know there are big ones, medium ones, and little ones in the Torah. Sheyesh b'hem esvan ravavin, big letters in the Torah, like the Aleph of Adam in Divrei Yomim. Esvan beinonim, normal letters in most of them. Vesan zir, there's also small letters. Hine mi esvan zirim. From the small letter, lo yeh li'olam, there will never be esvan beinonim ravim. Never, because that small letter will never turn into a middle-sized letter or a big letter. So it's true that there's bigger ones and smaller ones, but that's not because they're growing or shrinking. That's just because that's how they started. L'mayla mizeh, so beyond the ois, and again, the Rebbe will use that idea, and it'll become easier to understand as you go through the mind. It is somewhat hard to grasp what this ois is, but what is it? It's the basic building blocks of conscious reality, but it's like building blocks. It's like a stone, like a brick. It's daimim. L'mayla mizeh usugat semeach. So what's that in a person? Semeach sheba'adam. That's midas. Midas grow. They mature. That's insane. They're not going to be high. They don't live. I don't know. Why not? I think there would be a certain passion in midas. We'll see. because this is tzemeach. This is not chai. It's tzemeach. So what's the advantage of a midah? It can change. It can grow. Become more mature. Shua midah, sheish b'hem tzmicha. They grow, mikatnus legadlus. Obviously, the difference of the emotion of a child as opposed to the emotion of an adult. Much more sophisticated emotions in an adult than in a child. Oh, but now the Rebbe is going to leave behind midas right away and go to chai, and from understanding chai, we'll understand how midas doesn't have some of this. Because chai, what's chai? Chai is going to be there's chayus, there's vitality. It moves. So why doesn't a midah move? Well, we'll see. Right? It feels. Isn't a midah all about feeling? So why are we saying that the midah should semeach? Right? So and there's seichel. Oh, manyen. So let's see.
Seichel.
Well, in chai we said had seichel.
Okay.
That was that right? Midaber was not seichel. Midaber was lamayla mina seichel.
Right.
Chai was seichel, so we have to figure that out. Okay, so the Rebbe said one line about midas being sameach, or sameach being midas. The one thing he said is they grow. Yes, that's true. Midas mature. But why don't they have chayas? Why don't they? I mean, isn't the midah all about me feeling my own chayas, etc.? Let's see. No, the Rebbe says, why not? So let's first go to the above, and when we understand the above, we'll understand what midas are lacking. Is the third level. Chai, the animal life of the Adam. Now, again, we're talking about a person, but we're not talking about the physical nature of a person. We're talking about the conceptual and more spiritual nature of a person. So there's oisius, which are the building blocks, the basic building blocks that the person uses. They don't change; they're static. But a person uses them to express himself. Okay, there's semeach. What's that? That's our midas, our emotional reality, and that grows and matures. Then there's chai. What's chai? So chai we said was chayus, vitality, and seichel. In the world, that's what it was. So what is it in you and I? So it's obviously going to be seichel. Right? L'mayla mizeu suga chai ba'adam shua seichel. Usually we say seichel is metaber, but here the Rebbe is saying seichel is chai. Why? Because what does seichel give? Seichel penetrates our whole being and gives vitality to it. What gives vitality to our midas? A person does chesed. Okay, so he can do an act of chesed that's completely dry. That doesn't mean he's not doing it. He has a basic understanding that it's a proper thing to do. But he does it in a way that's completely dry. So someone asks for some tzedakah, and he gives tzedakah. But there's no life in his giving him tzedakah. But he's expressing chesed. He's expressing the midah of chesed. And it's a more mature expression of chesed to the extent that a child might not give and an adult will. Okay. But it's lacking in chayas. It's lacking in vitality. What will give that midah chayas? The intellectual understanding of the greatness of giving tzedakah. Once a person develops a more sophisticated understanding of what he's doing, he'll have more chayas in doing it or feeling it. Oh, so interesting enough, the hergish of the midah comes from seichel, not so much from the midah itself, which is really a fascinating thing to say. Why is it an animal? So an animal's barking at you because he's upset. Okay, but how deep is that emotional reality of the animal? Well, it's sort of just based on natural, that's his chip, and that's the way he reacts. Okay, what about a human who has intellect, sophisticated intellect, and can truly appreciate the situation they're in? So that will make the emotion much more powerful. Oh, so the chayas of the midah comes from seichel, not from the midah itself. The midah itself is the ability to connect to what's outside of me. What gives that vitality is a greater appreciation of reality. So when will my love be a deeper love? When I appreciate intellectually what it is that I love much more, so then my love will grow. But it'll be a completely different love. It'll be a vital deep love.
Not just lust.
Well, not just lust, right? And also even the love of a child. So now there's obviously a very, very deep love of a child for a parent. But that same child will, I hate you, right? Well, I don't understand. I thought you loved me. No, I hate you. Right. So, I mean, they, hopefully don't say that, but they might say it to each other. But even when when they're really small, they might say it. Mm-hmm. Right? I'm going to kill myself, then we'll see what you think. Right? So, that emotional state is not, are they really, on one hand, they're feeling very powerfully, right? There's no doubt about it. There's a very powerful feeling because there's no, usually we say intellect tempers emotion, right? Okay, so there's that's true. But the depth of that emotion, it's really a very shallow emotion. The more powerful it is as a child, the shallower the emotion is, and the more quickly it can change. The kid can all of a sudden be laughing 2 minutes later after he threw himself on the floor and was crying. Okay, so you'll say the reason he threw himself on the floor and was crying is because he doesn't have any intellect, and so his emotions express themselves very powerfully. That's true. But there's less highest in that emotion because it'll change very, very quickly. He's not really that upset, right? If he were really that upset, then it would take quite a while to overcome that disappointment that he's feeling. It might be in a minute he's back laughing. Okay, what about an adult? So an adult, if they have an emotion, the emotion has much more highest, and the emotion has much more reality. So they'll experience that emotion for longer. So adult love will be a love that is much more powerful and isn't whimsical, right? And the sadness of an adult, the adult will feel the pain of losing a lost one, right? Okay, so that's something the adult can appreciate in a very real way. So there's real highest to that emotional pain. Where's that coming from? The sophistication of the intellect of understanding the true extent of the situation. Right? So intellect is what's giving highest to the emotion. The emotion has a lot of energy on a certain level inside itself, but it's not sophisticated energy, and it's not real energy because in the child it's flipping back and forth. The child can be as high as a kite 1 minute, then as low as a valley the next minute, and as high as a kite the next minute. Right? Because the emotion is as powerful as it seems on the outside, it's not such a powerful emotion. So it doesn't last. Right? Whereas the more intellect will give highest to the emotions. So the emotion will be a long-lasting emotion. Really, usually we talk about it the other way around, but here the Rebbe is talking about the fact that the highest comes from the intellect. L'mayla mizeh is usuga chai, b'adam shu seichel kamesh kosav ha'chochma tichye. Chochma will give life. The pasuk says it. Okay, the Rebbe's not making this up. The midas. Now we're back to midas. Hine av shehem hergish, even though they are feeling, and we said one of the things that set apart chai from sameach was the hergish that the chai has. The animal has a feeling that the plant doesn't. Okay. The two differences in the first level, the two differences between the plant and the animal were chayus and hergish, which were one and the same thing, basically. And then seichel. Okay, so now the Rebbe is saying, wait, even though midah seems to be hergish, feeling, that's what a midah is. It's lacking vitality. Why? Midas nemtim nit durch in ganzen kiim haseichel dafka. The midah doesn't completely control him, whereas seichel does. Meaning, the midah doesn't penetrate into his being and become an expression of who he really is, whereas seichel does. What determines who a person is, and their mamish, their panemius, what they think about, what they understand, what they, right? Now it might be they understand things in a very, very unsophisticated way, okay, so that will be very definitional of them. or they understand things in a very, very sophisticated way. So that'll be very definitional, and that'll express itself in everything they do. Okay, now that'll also express itself in their midas, how their midas express themselves. So the midah is dependent on the seichel, not the other way around. So which is the pneumis of the person? Which penetrates into more of the being of the person? Their seichel, their intellectual reality, or lack thereof. Right? But everybody's intellectual, right? Meaning, some people's intellectual is unbelievably unsophisticated. Okay, but they're still thinking about things, right? Because people think. So they might only be thinking about their emotions, right? That's all they think about is what they feel. Okay, so what's giving that emotion chayas? They're thinking about it, not the emotion itself. The thought about the emotion is what's giving the emotion chayas. And since they've come to this incredibly unsophisticated conclusion that life is all about me expressing my emotional state, so then their emotions are very chayastic. But the chayas comes from that intellectual understanding as to what life is all about. Because even if you'll say on a certain level, that but it's coming from midas, and this is, we talked about this earlier, that in Tanya, so the Alter Rebbe talks about midas before meichin in the nefesh habahamis. First he talks about the midas of the nefesh habahamis, then he talks about the meichin. Why? Because the intellect of the nefesh habahamis is usually used to rationalize the connections and desires of the midas. Okay, but that itself is what the Rebbe is saying here. The midah has no chayas until intellect gives it chayas. So I have to rationalize this midah, or else I can't do it. I can't live it. I can't connect to it. I can't relate to it. I can't identify with it. What allows me to identify with a particular emotional feeling, desire, whatever it happens to be? The fact that my intellect has said it's okay. It might not be okay. It might be that I'm rationalizing something that's really disastrous. Okay, but I have to rationalize it. A human has to rationalize it. It has to get the okay in my intellect before that midah has real chayas. That's so interesting, right? So it's true. The impetus to connect to this stupid reality is midas. But unless my intellect figures out a way to rationalize that this is okay, I won't connect to it. I won't identify with it. Because intellect is what allows me to identify with something. That's what the Rebbe just said. Midas don't take me over. Intellect is what ultimately defines who I am. I might intellectually say that it's okay for this particular emotional desire to take me over. Oh, okay, but that's already because my intellect has decided that that's okay. And I won't let that happen unless somehow I can rationalize in my intellect that that's okay. So where's the chayas really coming from? Intellect. Wow. So now, in a positive way, if I'm giving tzedakah, so I can give tzedakah in a very dry way. Why? Well, chesed, I understand chesed is a positive thing to do. But what if I truly appreciate the importance of tzedakah, and I learn about it, and I go, so now I might identify with it, and therefore my emotional connection to it will be completely different, and my act of chesed will be a much deeper and more vital act of chesed. Okay, right. In positive reality, what's the source of the love? Intellectual contemplation. The meat is born from the intellect. The possibility of the meat is there, but how do I bring it into a state of revelation? Intellect. He's bringing us. Contemplation. Meditation. In negativity, I have to rationalize it. In positivity, it's obvious that the true source of the meat is the intellect. Mm-hmm. If I want to come to a love of God, what do I have to do? Develop a more intellectual appreciation of God. Now that doesn't when you say intellect, it doesn't mean necessarily just dry information, but it has to resonate in my head before it can resonate in my heart. So it starts.
This is what you could say, learning Torah will help with your emotional state.
Absolutely, 100%. 100%.
In a proper way.
In a proper way. In Kedusha, definitely we say, we talk about intellect first and then emotion. But even in Kalipa, where we talk about emotion first and then intellect, but the emotion, in order for it to be in order for it to be an emotion that I'm going to identify with and act in accordance with, I have to get the stamp of approval from my intellect. You and I call that rationalizing. This is really okay. I'm angry, I deserve to be angry, and I'm allowed to vent my anger. Oh, okay, then I will. But until I come to that conclusion, I won't. There's that switch. Okay. Amazing. Right? Lios, let's read that line again. Lios Shamidas nimmt dem nicht durch den Ganzen. They don't take over the person. They don't penetrate into the depth of the person. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute. This person's completely emotional being. That's all they do. They can barely think. All they do is feel all day long. And they identify with these feelings, and I feel this, and I feel that. Right. That's because you ask them, why do you act that way? They'll tell you intellectually why it's okay. Because they can't do that unless they've rationalized that as the reasonable way of being. Now, it's not a reasonable way of being, it's a stupid way of being. Okay, say that, but they're still going to have to rationalize it. So what is it that's truly penetrating into my being and I'll identify with? Ki'ima seichel dafka my seichel, what I understand intellectually. Shechochma hi reishis hakoiches penimim. Chochma is the beginning of our inner powers, and therefore, in seichel nimmt im durch in ganzen. Seichel is what completely takes over a person, and the person will identify with that which they understand to be the reality. So seichel is the source of that identity. Now, again, in Kalipa, the desire for that identity might come from midas, but I have to rationalize it. No speak. Huh? No speak. I mean, you look around today, what is it? All these words, new words that are used to describe situations that used to be completely beyond the pale and no one would think that that's reasonable. Now there's this whole new vocabulary that somehow cleanses that idea and turns it into something less ridiculous. Oh, okay. So I don't even know what it is, but interesting enough, they don't even use the words. In Canada, they talk about maid. M-A-I-D, maid. I don't know what maid is. Well, I know what maid is. I don't know why maid is. I assume the first two words are medically assisted, and I assume the D is death. Medically assisted suicide. So if you say medically assisted suicide, that's not good. That doesn't sound good. No. Okay, so we don't want to say that. We want to give it a name in intellect that will allow me to relate to that emotionally a different way. So I'll call it maid, which doesn't mean anything. Right? I mean, it does, but I don't know what it means, and you don't know what it means. And most people use it, don't know what it means. Okay, so 3% of the deaths in Canada are maid. 3%. Meaning, do not let your elderly relative into a Canadian hospital. So now, in order to cleanse that, right, and make it something that people can identify with, what do you have to do? You have to figure out how to package it so seichel won't be repulsed by it.
It's like
seichel, it's not emotions.
It's like when they talk about abortion, they'll say reproductive rights of a woman. They
Right.
can't say it, they can't.
Right, exactly. You talk about, you use different words. Why? Well, because I identify with what I'm thinking about in the seichel and those things that I understand. That's exactly what the Rebbe is saying. So if I want to somehow have a certain amount of control over what people are feeling, I'm going to have to figure out how to get into their head and allow them to justify certain behavior patterns. And then I can change the way they're feeling. Then they'll identify with that. Okay. Right. So that's what the Rebbe is saying here. So it starts with Seichel. Shachachma hi reishis hakochos hapnimim, und Seichel nimmt im durch im Ganzen. Seichel is what takes over a person, meaning Seichel is what a person identifies with. Hine beseichel, therefore in Seichel yesh Freischkeit, it's fresh, when Lebendigkeit, and it's exciting, living. Now this is so interesting because usually we relate to Lebendigkeit is coming from Midas. That Seichel is calm, cool, collected, and Midas is passionate. That's true. But where does the passion of the Midah come from? From the fact that my intellect has allowed that passion to be, meaning I'll justify that passion. I'll rationalize that passion. Or, on a positive level, the intellectual understanding will be the source of that passion. I realize that the Eibishter is worthy of my love, so hopefully that love becomes passionate. Now, we learned in the previous Maimon that also affects my nefesh elokis, that also affects my intellect. Okay, meaning that it'll bounce back and forth, but it starts with the intellect, the fresh kind. Right? When is a person excited about something? You just learned about an idea. You've known this idea for a long time, but now you just learned about it in a mimer. Wow, amazing idea. I heard such an amazing idea. This isn't the first time I heard the idea, but I just learned about it again. So now it's fresh. Oh, so there's lebendigkeit in the idea. There's chayas in the idea. I'm excited about the idea. Right? Every time we hit a new parsha, you remember, oh wow, yeah, there's a great sikha in this parsha. Oh, and you learn the sikha again. What a sikha. Wow. L'maylim mizeh. Okay, so that's chai. So deimim is esis. Semeach is midas. Chai is seichel. Because seichel is what gives chayas to the midas. Seichel is what penetrates into something and gives it vitality. Seichel is what I identify with. L'maylim mizeh usuga medaber sheba adam. What's that? Shu etzem nefesh. Shelamaylim mina seichel. That's etzem nefesh, which is beyond seichel. Because we said medaber is beyond seichel. Now we still have to explain that because medaber means to speak, and speak is an expression of seichel, and always we say medaber is seichel. Okay, so the Rebbe's going to have to explain that. He is. In the meantime, he just wants us to understand that and say, okay, that we get it. This is the equation. I'll explain the equation, but he wants us to understand the equation first, just that there is such an equation. So, medaber is etzem nefesh, which allows us to get beyond the limitations of seichel. The seichel eino mailas medaber. Seichel is not one of the advantages of the medaber. Now, the medaber in this context means humankind, because we're the medaber. Shahare seichel yeshna gam b'balei chayim. A certain level of intellect also exists in animals, as we were talking about. The animal certainly comes to certain conclusions. The level of seichel, generally the way Chassidus explains the difference between the animal seichel and human seichel can understand ideas. The animal seichel can't understand an idea, but it comes to conclusions. It makes conclusions. How is it the animal knows what to relate to emotionally? Seichel. The animal comes to the conclusion, shezet tovli, this is good for me. Oh, so I'll eat it. Or I'll go after it to eat it. Or I'll whatever. Right? This is bad for me. Okay, so I won't eat it. Or I'll run away from it. Or I'll hide from it, whatever. So the animal's always making those decisions. A plant isn't. A plant can't decide that this is dangerous, I should move. Plants are just there. So the fire is coming. What does the plant do? Nothing. So the plant doesn't have any chayas whatsoever. The chai has chayas. What does he do? He runs away from the fire. Or he runs towards the water because he's thirsty. The plant can't run to the water. The plant is 100 meters from a lake. It hasn't rained in 2 years. The plant is brown and brittle and dry. There's a lake over there. Why don't you go to the lake? Because the plant can't do that. There's no chayas. Right? An animal. What does he do? He walks over to the lake and he takes a drink. Right? And he might even take a drink at all those videos about the African safari, etc. So there's a crocodile in the water, right? So the deer are drinking the water, but they have to be careful that the crocodile doesn't come and grab them. So they're drinking very, very carefully. Okay. So they have enough seichel to understand that on one hand the water is good for me, on the other hand there's danger in the water, so I have to drink the water very carefully. And they do, you watch them. Every now and then they'll get, an alligator will come and they'll jump back or taka. I mean, sometimes you see they get caught, their head, and then they're busy trying to get their head out of the alligator's mouth. And okay, that's a battle. Right? Monkeys, you see these monkeys who get stuck in the alligator. It's like the wildest things in the world. The monkey gets stuck in the alligator's head and in the alligator's mouth, and the monkey's like turns around and is standing on the alligator's head and he's hitting him and he's trying to get out of there. Okay. Does he? Well, in the ones that they show, he usually does. I don't know what happens. The ones you don't see. Right. But, okay. So the monkey, when he goes to drink in the water, he knows on one hand the water is good for me, on the other hand the water is dangerous. A plant doesn't know that. That's chai. Seichel is Vayidaber is the ability to go even beyond seichel. So we said that even the seichel b'balei chayim canal umaylis a Vayidaber. So then, what's the Vayidaber about? Who etzem hanefesh shelamayla mi'aseichel is the essence of the soul which is beyond seichel. The inyan zeh mizgala. Oh, now the Rebbe is going to explain. The inyan zeh. This is this level of the person. Where is it revealed? Besuga daimim. It's expressed in daimim. Now that was said at the end of the first paragraph, and the Rebbe just threw it out there and we didn't understand. So now the Rebbe is going to explain it a little bit. Zemis gala besuga daimim, shu oisias adibur, which are the letters of speech. The seichel mizgala b'midos, right? That seichel is revealed in midos, right? How my midos are expressing themselves. Obviously, is based on my intellectual understanding. Umaylas Vayidaber shelamayla miseichel, and that which is the loftiness and the level of the Vayidaber. And what's that? That's beyond seichel. That's not necessarily. I mean, it will also be revealed in midas, but it's even revealed ba'oisias dafka. Let's see. The oisias adibur, the letters of speech, imbai mi etzem nefesh. Comes from the essence of the soul. I mean, how a person expresses themselves. Shah nefesh malaya oisias. The nefesh is full of oisias, which are the periodic table that allows the nefesh to express itself in all sorts of different ways. Right? What's the periodic table? All these different elements. So the elements are all domain, right? But what do the elements allow for? Different physical expression. So everything is made up of all these elements. So if you mix 2 parts of hydrogen and 1 part of oxygen, you get wet. Okay. So that's now, what about hydrogen and oxygen? Are they wet? No. What are they? Oisias. Hydrogen can't be turned into oxygen, and oxygen can't be turned into hydrogen. They are what they are. They're domain, but they can be used in different ways to bring about a different expression of reality. So interestingly enough, the highest, so to speak, the highest level of the Eibishter, what does he use to bring about physical reality? Daimim. And what's the daimim expressing? The creative genius of the Eibishter. It's all expressed in daimim. It's what he created. The actual created stuff is all daimim. Right? Even in the Tzemeach, there's all a bunch of daimim, right? There's physical reality in the Tzemeach that's put together in a certain form in which it expresses itself as Tzemeach, but the basic elements in that thing are daimim. When they are together, so then they express themselves in smicha, growth. So to an animal, so to a person. Also just made up of little pieces of daimim held together in a sort of interesting way. So what's the raw material that etzem and nefesh uses to express itself?
That's a big concept.
Was the, so to speak, what the Eibishter used to express himself? Elements. The periodic table. Isn't everything just that? It's all that, isn't it? Now, okay, even that you can now get more sophisticated and realize, okay, but that's all just a bunch of atoms, and those atoms are all just a bunch of protons. What do they call protons? And protons, neutrons. Okay, there's all that stuff in there. But what are they? They're also just daimim, right? Just little pieces of stuff. It's all just a little bunch of pieces of stuff. It's where ultimately it's all expressed. Right? What's being expressed there? The Eibishter's creative genius is all expressed in this stuff. The most powerful expression of Elokus is that we can experience is in that stuff. So to you and I, how do we express ourselves? How does our nefesh express itself? Well, it thinks, speaks, it also does. So does is obviously daimim, but even thinking and speaking is daimim. Because what am I thinking and speaking with? Oisius. And interesting enough, I'll express my oisius differently than you'll express your oisius, because you and I are different. My etzem is different than your etzem. So I'll use the same oisius, but I'll express them slightly differently than you will. So you'll learn the Ran, the Ritva, and the Rashba on a sugya, and they're all explaining the same sugya, and they're actually all explaining it in a relatively similar way, but they're using different oisias to explain that idea. So the Ran will explain it one way, and the Ritva will explain it another way, and the Rashba will explain it another way, and that really is an expression of the etzem of the neshama of the Ran, the Ritva, and the Rashba. They are slightly different one from the other, so they will say an idea that's very similar, but they'll say it in a slightly different, nuanced way. They're learning the same page of Gemara. And they're even dealing with the same problem. And they're even giving the same basic answer. But they'll all say it a slightly different way. Why? Because they're different. Why? Because their etzem is different. I mean, the Rashba is the Rashba, the Ritva is the Ritva, the Ran's the Ran. And if you're a big Talmud Chacham, you will appreciate the style of the Rashba, how it differs from the style of the Ran. Now you have to know a lot to appreciate that, right? You and I are going to read it, and we're just going to go, oh, the Ran and the Rashba are a little different. Well, if I learned every Rashba on Shas and every Ran on Shas, I'd come, and I thought about it in a sophisticated way, I could come to a certain conclusion as to the style of the Rashba as opposed to the style of the Ran. Even though they're dealing with the same stuff. And they're answering the same questions. Because the conceptual questions of the Gemara are generally the same. There's a problem in this sugya that we have to deal with. How? The Rashba will usually do it this way. The Ran will usually do it this way. What are they using? Their oisies.
Is that why the Rebbe was able to uniquely, in some sense, put together these different opinions and these different, because he could see the basic level of
Also, absolutely. The Rebbe also has his very unique style and unique way of using oisius to express his understanding of something. Very unique.
How does the putting together the domain, the oisius together to get highest, is that like what you said about hydrogen, oxygen, and the water?
Those will be the oisius of creations, of physical creation. Yeah, the basic elements will be the oisius of, or the oisius are the basic elements of, I mean, it depends. If you're starting from science, you'll call oisius elements. If you're starting from Torah, you'll call elements oisius. Right? It's a matter of what oisius you're using to describe the same basic thing. Okay. In other words, which idea have you identified with such that you will describe things in terms of that idea? So if you started by identifying with science, so then you'll identify ideas in Torah with scientific ideas. If you started with Torah, then you will identify scientific ideas within the context of Torah because that's what you really identify with. And that's based on your Sefer. Right? So you'll use atzilus as a mushal for something, because that's how you think. You're thinking about atzilus, what's here, what's the difference, what's this, what's that. So you'll say, oh, he's just an atzilus, that guy. Now someone who learns Chassidus will understand what you mean. It's a hard time, bringing things down into some sort of organized way in Eilam Hazar. Come, let's try to finish the paragraph.
Yeah.
So Seichel will express itself in midas. So the Chai will express itself in the Tzemeach. It's really interesting. But the Etzem will express itself in the Domain, in the oisius. Wow. Three lines up. The oisius is Diber and by Me'etzem and Nefesh. Shanefesh malay oisius. The Kameshin benefesh einim b'metzias, as they are in the nefesh, they're not yet in a state of existence. It's just an essential reality of this person. Then they come into a state of existence. And what's that existence? As oisius. Where are they coming from? Etzem and Neshama. What's the essence of this person? What's he really all about? Ukamesha Kosa Betanya. The Shinui Hatziluos Shubisvasayim, the different movements of the lips, Levata to express Ois Beis, Oi Vav, Oi Mem, Oi Pei. That's boomf. Those boomf comes from the lips. P, M, P, V. Right? So those sounds come from the lips. There are sounds that come from other places. L, L, L. You're not using your lips, you're using your tongue. Say a lamed. When you sing a bass, you're not using your tongue, you're using your lips. B. Right? All the different letters come from different parts of the mouth. S. Comes from somewhere else, and exactly what. And there's L. So L is your tongue and your palate, like your L. If you don't put your tongue up there, you can't make a L. Right? It has to be touching the top of your mouth and come down. La. Don't let your tongue touch the top of your mouth and try to say a la. Doesn't work. Okay? So different parts of the mouth are responsible for different oisius. Kamechin b'shar might say it's also the 5 motzaot hapeh, the 5 different parts of the mouth that are responsible for the sounds we make. Ein zeh al pi achonas haseichel. This isn't based on intellect preparing this part of my mouth to work this way. Because if it were up to intellect, then I could be taught to do it a different way. No, it's just the way the mouth works. What's that? That's etzem. That's just the essence of the mouth, right? Ki'im zeba mamela, just comes consequently. Why? The zeba miya oisius shebenefesh comes from the oisius of the nefesh. Nefesh malay oisius. And that's why kids know how to make those sounds. Even though they don't necessarily have any sefer. But they go la 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 la, ba 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 ba. They'll start making sounds. They won't make words, but they'll make sounds. Now, what are those sounds really? Well, really, those sounds are ACS. They don't know how to put the ACS together to make a word, but they're just expressing ACS. And all of the languages have basically the same ACS. There's a few that are different. It's something that Americans can't do. Baruch, Baruch no, Baruch. So that's the throat. Okay. You and I have a very hard time doing a real resh. Resh, because it's also it's coming from the tongue, but also the palate. So we're not good at that. Don't name your kid. Drawer. Whoa. Drawer. So then he sounds like a drawer in a cabinet, right? No, it's a drawer. Okay, so it's very hard for us to do that. Someone French has a much easier time because they have one of those. So there's a few slight differences, but it's basically all the same ACS. Where they're coming from? The etzem. So the etzem is revealed in the domain. Now that's also going to be an unveiled. That's the next thing. The Rebbe's going to talk about. We'll see it tomorrow. What's today? Tuesday. We won't see it tomorrow. We'll see it Thursday because Wednesday we don't have class. Kamechinu ba'aveda. Now that I was just talking about the way we are. Now what about an aveda? So there's going to be an aveda of doimim. It just is what it is. Never changes. It's there, but that's people doing mitzvahs by rote. Then there's semeach. Okay, so there's a little more growth in it. There's not real chayis yet. Then there's chay, that's going to be chayis. And then there's etzem. And where's the etzem going to be expressed? Daimim. How serious he is about actually doing this. Okay, we'll see. That's next. This is all to answer these questions. We're gonna at the end we're gonna have to answer all our questions. Now we're not doing that at all.